Hi, I'm Phil from the American Anglican Council with another episode of One Big Idea, where we look at the scriptures for the coming week. This week, the second Sunday in Lent. The lessons for this week are from Genesis 15, Psalm 27, Philippians 3, and Luke chapter 13. Normally, I look at the gospel, but this morning, and in light of our headline Lenten meditation on self-examination of our hearts and ministry, and the podcast on the need to care for our hearts that I had with the Reverend Jeff Chapman, I just couldn't help but be drawn by the fact that our heart is addressed 3 times in Psalm 27. So I want to suggest Psalm 27, and one big idea from Psalm 27 is that though we encounter many difficult situations in our lives, we have no need to fear when in our hearts we put our trust in God. So let me unpack that through the scriptures here. You know, David had been saved from an army of evil men who were advancing toward him like a pack of wolves, but they'd been stopped in their tracks. And David sees the Lord's hand in this. It was light in the darkness, salvation from certain destruction, as we see in verse 1. And after this, he feels there's nothing to fear, even an outbreak of war, even a siege in verse 3, because nothing could be more dangerous than the situation he's currently facing and from which he's just escaped. So if God could save him from that, he could save him from anything. Therefore, we can be confident, trusting God in the midst of evil, seeking his presence, and waiting for his provision. So what that means is that I can be confident in God's salvation and not fear those who will come upon me. I seek to dwell in God's presence and his protection with joy in verses 4 through 6. I seek gracious salvation. So David says, forsake me not and take me in verses 7 through 10. And wait for the Lord. Be courageous in spite of my violent enemies. In verses 11 through 14. Well, what about those 3 references to the heart? One is right there in verse 3, though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Imagine what it would be like to live with hearts that are without fear. And it goes on and says that because my heart shall not fear, in verses 4 through 6, that David is able to say, one thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. What a wonderful picture of worship, isn't it? So a right heart of faith in God rather than fear leads us right into worship. And then worship in turn allows David, or propels him forward to say, because my heart is in this place, because I'm seeking the Lord, my head shall be lifted up above my enemies. And then he continues to go a little deeper in verses 7 through 10. He says, you have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. So that right attitude in the heart leads to worship, leads to confidence, our head being raised up, and then even a deeper condition of the heart where we're actually intimately seeking God face to face. To look in someone's eyes, that actually is about the deepest intimacy you can possibly imagine. And that's what David's talking about here in this wonderful psalm. Well, he finally concludes on verses 11 through 14 about waiting for the Lord, courageous in spite of violent enemies. He says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And so he concludes, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. What a great word for us in the church in the midst of a culture that sometimes seems out of control, where we can even feel as a church that we are increasingly under pressure, just like David was. But we can say, we're going to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living as we wait for the Lord, as our hearts take courage. That's a good thing, to focus on the heart. That's our theme really this week in this Lenten season, in all that we're sharing with you. It's a fine lesson for the church that we care for our hearts, but it's also a good way to approach people who do not yet know Jesus, to listen to them, to love them, to compassionately walk with them, but to ask them, how's your heart? What's going on in your heart? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you determining? That can be a wonderful entree to sharing the gospel. So may our hearts be right as we enter into this second week of Lent, and may they always be fixed on the love of Jesus Christ, his salvation for us, the confidence that he gives us, so that we can lift our head even above those who are maybe resisting us in some way or coming after us, and know that we're going to see the Lord in the land of the living. From Psalm 27. God bless you. Have a great week.